I look at women who are part of the YWCA, and they come from many of the suburbs, but we're serving inner city girls. So I think much of the leadership is coming from outside of the city, and I think there's a great investment of those of us who have had good fortune to believe that we should be caring as we climb.
I will add to that, and I agree. The only thing I would say was, in the church we have this notion of the drive-in church, people who come in on Sunday and leave. And I also acknowledge the fact that there's a great contribution of folks who live outside. I don't live in the city of Cleveland, so I would be hypocritical to say that. However, though, what we talk about in our ministry is about the act of presence, the act of being there. Just to give you an example, this morning we were framing this program, and a person walked in who would be a recipient of this program. We learned more from this client than all the little framing and thinking that we were doing. So I think it's an issue of being there. That's what can bring a neighborhood back, and that's what create what we call reneighboring.
Reneighboring, I like that. Oh, there's a hand in the, here's a question.
Just a quick question is, do you think that having organizations that are specifically African American or specifically Hispanic kind of perpetuates the divide of the races? And if so, how do we unite the divide?
Good question.
Good question.
Raymond.
I absolutely agree. and I also say it goes to, you can add another one in there, and that's class. I think that maybe one of the answers to Mr. Stone's comment, we've worked together for a while. To a certain extent, I would say that the opportunity that is present in community development is to think outside the box and to potentially say that there's going to be a need for reinvestment, but perhaps that reinvestment may be with a new African American Hispanic group that is of a different class, maybe a different attitude, that will hopefully be able to help bring together new blood, new money into communities that had traditionally been disinvested. And that, I think, in addition to the traditional self-help models, is a way that we can all self-help here.
Barbara?
I think that they do perhaps perpetuate the divide, but I also think that the organizations, that within each of the cultures there are some unique issues that are specifically addressed. And I therefore think that those organizations are very important, have served us well historically. But in terms of where do we go from here and what's next, I think there's an incredible opportunity for some of those organizations to come together and organizationally begin to bridge that divide.
We are living in, our organization has made an intentional decision to move from being Latino specific to being Latino serving, because we were in the heart of an African American, growing African American community. And when African American children began to come to us, we said, folks, let's drop our labels. We still speak Spanish, we're still culturally competent, we're still linguistically adequate, but we are allowing the mission of our organization to be dictated by the needs of the neighborhood. And I think it has been that synergy in allowing folks from the community to inform us about what's happening in the neighborhood. So I also honor the Latino specific in the whole leadership that came from with that. But I'm on the other side. And chairman of my organization is here, and it had been difficult situations. There had been a lot of discussions about, this is kind of not a good thing to do, but it has proven pragmatically that is the right thing to do in this climate.
Yeah, I would add to that and say that's an interesting question that you asked. I've actually dealt with that quite a bit. One of the things that we do is we go into corporations and set up emerging leader groups. And so one of the things that organically happens is that if you create an emerging leader group at Company X, and there are 14% African Americans, 7% Hispanics, 3% Asian Americans, East Indians, you develop affinity groups, because there are certain a-specific needs that those individuals will have. If you go into a bank and you set up an emerging leader group that deals with banking, there are issues that women in banking are going to have that the men in that group won't even come to mind or be top of mind for them. There are issues that African Americans or Asian Americans. So I think that it goes back to the issue of understanding. I think that we're growing towards a place, like Max says, where we're going to a more multicultural society. But at the place in which we are in now, it is a situation where I think that there is a definite need for these affinity groups or these A-specific groups to serve the needs of those communities and then come back as part of that collective.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Ashley Evans. Actually, she asked my question somewhat in reverse, though. But so I guess to kind of rephrase that, though, I think that at times there's a feeling from African American organizations, and when there is particularly an African American focused program, organization, group, that oftentimes there's somewhat of a feeling as if we've there's almost a slap in the face because it's like we haven't opened it up to the Hispanic community. And not to say that any of these organizations were formed to do so, but they were formed to address the needs of that community as a whole, of the African community as a whole, and their differences and things like that. So I was just kind of wondering if we kind of speak on that, if there was kind of more of a, how do we really address that? How do we make it okay for us to address our needs specifically, but yet collaborate at the same time? I mean, there are very real similarities in our community, but yet there's also differences that we probably do need to separate and kind of handle, kind of like cleaning your own house before you're able to extend a hand to others.
Barbara?
I think the first step is we really have to get to know each other. We live in the same city, and I think for most of us, we just don't know each other. So before we talk about bridges and, doing a lot of these things, it just seems to me that we have to find forums in perhaps small environments where we can sit down and talk to each other very candidly, be able to open and answer the difficult questions and really understand. And I know Reverend Max raised earlier the whole issue of immigration. And we were talking about this earlier. As an African American, I would really appreciate the Hispanic community to help me understand better all the dynamics and the complexity of this issue, because really who's informing me is the majority media right now, and I'm not sure that's necessarily the best source of information.
That's 2 dollars.
I don't quite say that. But, these are important issues that are affecting our country and our community. So I think we need to find ways on topics of these type where we come together and sit and talk and understand and learn from each other.
I think geographic location also impacts tremendously who we serve. And of course we talk about West and East and the whole issue of where the majority of our populations are. But within the Hispanic community, we have seen agencies that have started receiving Vietnamese clients or Arab Americans. And it's all because of the geographic location of those agencies and who they serve and how people find the resources. So for us to reach across West and East, it has to be more intentional because the communities may not be all within the same surrounding area. So it takes a lot more effort.
Yes. Okay. I think there's Mr. Lopez? Oh.
Mark Batson of Policy Bridge. They say that can't teach an old dog new tricks. And we certainly need some new tricks in this region. But my question really is around intergenerational leadership. And how do the African Americans on the panel feel that that's a challenge? Do the Hispanics feel that that's a challenge within their community? And how important is it for us all to move forward together?
Raymond?
I was listening to the question here, actually, and one of the things that is important is that the